Okay, I'm feeling like a churro today, but I want something more than a churro. I want to compose a dish, and being that it's fall, I'm gonna utilize Japanese purple sweet potatoes. And I'm gonna try to make a dish along the way with it. This is a Japanese purple sweet potato. I'm not only using it for the beautiful purple color, it's also got like a nice sweetness. It's almost mapley when you cook it off. It's a little more sweet than a yam, I would say. It gives off a nice flavor. But the reason why I'm gonna be using potatoes for the churros today is because for the churros, I make what's called a pot of choux dough. And if you've ever had a pot of choux dough, you probably also had a potato gnocchi. Now, potato gnocchi, it's a little more fluffier than a regular pot of choux. So I'm thinking if I use these in my dough, it's gonna make the churros a little more fluffier, but it's also gonna make them a beautiful purple color, just like this. Another reason why I wanna use this is because it's seasonal. You know, it's fall time right now, so I want to be able to kind of do something that's festive and holiday-ish and gives me that comforting holiday vibe. And churros, they're a comfort food to me, mainly because I grew up on the border. You know, me and my mom, we would walk across the border. We'd go to this Mexican grocery store called the Soriana. It's a big box grocery store. And they had these churros there, and I would get a nice, warm, fluffy churro. And it was always so comforting to me, and I loved going to that grocery store because of that. Anyways, I'm just kind of drawing back to that feeling of comfort with comfort holiday food flavors with these churros. And I thought I could make a nice little dish out of it. Okay, now that I've got the purple sweet potatoes, I'm thinking of what to use to compose this dish. I'm thinking something like bright, something herbaceous. I don't have that stuff. Churros are the vessel for this dish. When I say that, I'm saying I'm not trying to make churros better in a sense. I'm trying to use it as the vessel for the dish inspiration, which this is gonna be like holiday inspired, very festive, very warm, comforting. We've got the sweet potatoes, which is a standard holiday item, sage, standard holiday vibe herb, and that's gonna just come together and make this really cohesive, warm, comforting dish. And it just so happens to be churros, because I love churros. It's my childhood. Now, why am I buying ricotta? I thought I was making churros, right? Well, the reason being is carbs and cheese. It's like one of the best combos ever. Think about pizza. When you're going savory, you want like a warm, fluffy bread and a whipped cheese to go on top of it to make a really good bite. Why sage for this dish in churros? It gives it that holiday vibe and also the herbaceousness to balance things out. Okay, so all in all, total was $24. Now that might be the cost for a dish on an appetizer menu. So we could make a bunch of appetizers for $24. So churros are already good. Why try to elevate the churro? Why try to fix it? Not really fix it, but why try to make it better? Well, I think potato can make it just a little fluffier. Just like when I were to make a pot of choux dough that has potato for a potato gnocchi. I wanted to get that fluffy interior, but also that crispy exterior on the churro. And I think by adding potatoes, it's gonna do just that for me, because when you do add potatoes, it does add that potato starch, which helps with the crispiness on the outside and the fluffy on the inside. I don't really know the science of this all, but the starch is what helps things to crisp up. That's why the best fried chicken batters have potato starch or corn starch or even like a rice starch, something like that. It does help with that frying the exterior, make it nice and crispy. Now another thing that I should note is I'm using a scale to measure out all of my things. With most of my recipes, I do recommend you utilize a scale, especially when you're making a dough and baking, because it's just nicer to be more exact by weight, because whenever you using these has their time and place, but when it comes to baking, making doughs, it's just nicer to be more exact because certain things can fill up these things a little differently. hence flour. I can pack flour in and then it could take up less space and it could be a whole different measurement at that point. So yes, the whole reason for using the scale is just to measure by weight and get it exact, because you can't really get exact with volume. You need to be cracking your eggs in advance when making a dough like this. Now the reason being is things happen pretty fast when making a pot of choux dough. You need to add the eggs in while it's still warm. And also, eggs scramble with heat, of course. We don't really want it to scramble, which is why I use a mixer and I crack my eggs in advance so I'm ready to go. There's no time wasted with cracking. Now, I usually use 2 eggs for this churro dough recipe, but since I'm using potato, adding potato to this, that's gonna add much more moisture and it's gonna make it denser. So this is going to add some structure and stability to my dough. This is all of my mise en place for the churros, minus what's boiling back there, those sweet potatoes. All of that gets put together to form our pot de choux dough. And why do I call it mise en place? Well, mise en place just in chef world, in cook world, it just means everything in its place. So it's really good to set this habit up whenever you're cooking anything. Even baking, for example. For me, it's baking. When I'm baking, I need to set up all this stuff because if everything's in its place, I work better. This is the pot I'm gonna be using to cook off the churro dough, and this is the potato going directly into the pot, and this is called a food mill. And now a food mill allows me to basically mash the potatoes without overworking the potatoes, because if we overwork the potatoes, it's gonna become almost like gluey and dense, and we do not want that. So I just add in the butter, sugar, water into that pot, and it goes directly on the heat. And I need to melt that butter and bring it up to a simmer, and immediately I'll toss in the flour. But before that happens, while this is happening, I just wanted to say, you could also do this with other potatoes, even a regular sweet potato or a yam. The reason why I chose this one is just the pretty purple color, and I love the mapley flavor that you get from Japanese purple sweets. If your store doesn't have them, then you could just go with a regular sweet potato yam. It's perfect for this season. So right now I have the heat on low all the way, and the reason why I still have the heat on is because when I mix it, the flour needs to sort of cook through a bit, and I need to heat it up for the eggs so it can be ready for the eggs. And the texture that I'm looking for is like a sort of like a bouncy firm dough that kind of just sticks to the spoon like this. Now I can turn the heat off and then take this to the counter. That is what I'm looking for right there. It's like a shiny dough that's still workable through the piping bag. Now you might also be noticing, hey, this doesn't look purple like in that popular short form video you posted. Well, reason being is if you do boil your potatoes like I did today, be mindful, all that purple is gonna come out in the water and you might be left with a dough that's not quite as purple as the one I initially made. I initially roasted them in the short form video, and that's why it was a deeper, darker purple. When you roast your potatoes, it intensifies the flavor. I was just strapped on time today, that's why I didn't roast them, and I wanted to boil them and make some churros for you guys to see. For the most part though, the flavor is going to stay the same. This is more of just a color situation, because purple potatoes, their colors can bleed very easily. These are the tools I'm using to pipe the churros out. Now, a reason why I have 2 piping bags is to give you a very important tip here. I have friends that ask me, why did the churros pop out of the bag when I made your recipe?
And of course ran into some problems. Piping bag didn't work. It was a dumb piping bag and it was the wrong one to be using.
Well, reason being is if you use a plastic like this or even a Ziploc bag, which is also a great tip whenever piping stuff, the dough is too tough and it's too hot to pipe out of plastic. It will pop out, you're gonna be left with a mess. So It's very necessary to go out and get one of these. You can get it on Amazon, you can find it at Walmart, Target, whatever, they all have it. A nylon piping bag. This is what we always use in the restaurants. Ours were a little bit bigger, but this will not pop on you. It can withstand the heat, and you can wash this in the dishwasher or hand wash, whatever. It will last you pretty much forever. As you can tell, this one's pretty old. These are my piping tips. This is optional, honestly. Like sometimes I have used this wide star tip, and this one's nice. I like this one. I mean, you could even go without the star tip if you want. It's all really optional. But for today, this one. I think this one's a little fun. It's got a lot of teeth. It's a little more narrow, so it's gonna produce more churro, I'd say. Okay, now it's time to fry. Let me talk about the oil that I'm using for this. So I'm using what's called beef tallow. Now this is a preference thing. I just am staying away from mostly seed oils like canolas and stuff like that. But if I were to use a seed oil, I would use probably, not pumpkin seed, but I would use a peanut oil or an avocado oil. Even rice oil will work. Now, here is the benefit to using beef tallow though. If you do want these churros to hold up a little better, the beef tallow, when it cools, it sort of congeals. So you're gonna be left with like this outer exterior that's protecting the churros and not like absorbing it like a sponge like it would with, say, a seed oil. It's just a little different as it cools. That's another thing. But now let's talk about the temperature of the oil. I always use a digital thermometer. I'm looking for about 320, 330 degrees Fahrenheit. Be mindful though, as you add stuff to this, the temperature will drop slightly. So you could maybe look for 340, but we never want to go over like 350 because it can burn before cooking the interior. And as far as time goes, honestly, it's just till it's done. I cook it off at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. And once it starts to get like GBD on the outside, I'll pull a piece out, maybe break some off and see how it is inside. Typically, it's like 5-ish minutes if you're at 325 degrees Fahrenheit with this dough. Now you might have noticed I just piped it straight into the oil whatever way I wanted. I've come to like it like this. I like the shape that it gives. Sometimes it's random, sometimes it's a swirl if I swirl it. If you've seen my churro videos in the past, then you have seen that I can show you how to get the perfect shaped churro. And the way I do that is I pipe it out onto a sheet tray, I toss it into the freezer, and once it's frozen off, I can cut it or just toss it in whatever shape I piped it out into. You can do that route if you'd like, but to me, I think it comes out fluffier when I freshly pipe it into the dough, and there's just some sort of like character and personality you get out of piping it straight into the dough. See, like it's just like a nice little squiggle going on there. I really like it like this. Now let me talk about what I call chorizo honey. And this is a condiment that you could probably even just have on its own. It's so good. So basically what I start off with is that store-bought chorizo that I had. I cooked that off. And then of course I'm chopping up some herbaceous sage because I think that's gonna add a fall festiveness to this honey. You could leave that out if you don't like sage. That gets tossed in with the chorizo and then finished off with some local honey. This sort of mimics, I would say, a Nashville hot. Not as spicy, but it also has some meat to it. Nashville hot's usually pork fat with all the spices and a lot of sugar. This is obviously honey instead of sugar, and I think this is gonna be a really nice topper or glaze, you can call it, for the churros or even on toast, whatever kind of carb. Put it on anything. This stuff is one of my favorite condiments right now. This is gonna help cut through the fat. It's also going to help sort of lubricate everything. I don't know if that's the word I should use, but it's gonna help lubricate everything. And the abrasiveness of the sage, it kind of needs that to cut through. And it's just gonna tie it all together. I'm also going to be making the whipped ricotta right now. So first, lemon zest. And also here's a really good tip for zesting your lemons. I am sort of doing it like I'm peeling a potato. It allows me to go and get all of the lemon and not just one piece of it at a time. This is just a good way to zest, I would say. Then a fair amount of lemon juice. This is gonna help us to cut through that fat that we talked about earlier. So typically whenever I finish a dish, I always season with salt, acid, and some sort of umami. It could be MSG, it could be tomatoes, it could be whatever, some sort of umami to help. So salt, acid, umami. Flaky salt. Whipped ricotta. Japanese purple sweet potato churros with whipped lemon ricotta and a chorizo honey, topped with some sage for pop. This is definitely a hand food, and this is an appetizer I would put on my menu at a restaurant, maybe even in my cookbook, we'll see. This is a really good savory dish.